I'm Hannah Bowler. I'm a reporter here at Digital Frontier, and over the next sort of 30 minutes or so, we're going to be discussing how we can navigate the frontiers of tech and safety. Now, founders and investors are increasingly balancing innovation with user safety, data privacy, and algorithmic fairness. Now, as tech's influence on society is ever more prevalent, it's an important issue that we really need to dig into. But it's easy to despair about this topic, but there is cause for optimism. And I've rallied 3 experts in the field to try and give us a little bit of cause for optimism and a little bit of hope and some takeaways, I think, that you can all bring back to your businesses today. Now, on the end, we have Kenneth Bowles, who's a technology ethicist and is author of Future Ethics. And next to him, we have Livia Dolle, who's founder of Teks. And we have Dr. Anna Vartapetiance, who is CEO and co-founder of Securium. Now, I don't want to take up too much time with the panel discussing kind of your backgrounds, but if you could give us all a quick whistle-stop tour of each of your sort of backgrounds and what you currently do, just so everyone is better acquainted. Kenneth.
I'll kick off. Hi, everyone. I'm Kenneth. So my background is previously in design. So I designed apps within the technology sector in Silicon Valley for 20-something years, but then I switched into technology ethics, responsible design, responsible innovation. Last year I was a Fulbright Scholar at Elon University, and now I work with tech companies to help them make responsible and ethical and safe digital products.
Go down the line.
Yes. Hi, I'm Livia. I'm founding a cybersecurity startup for the agentic area, and previously I founded other ventures and managed a fund.
Hi everyone, Anna. I wear various hats. One is that I'm CEO and co-founder of Tech for Good company. Our job is to design solutions that detect and prevent online harm. That goes for child sexual grooming, rape and serious sexual offenses, radicalization, and so on and so forth. Other than that, I wear 2 other hats. I'm the committee member of British Society's ethics groups, very similar to you, trying to make sure the ethics and AI and personal elements are considered when solutions are designed. But I also founded, and I'm a director of OSTIA, Online Safety Tech Industry Association. This is when the big tech comes and says, we cannot protect people. My job within the UK is to gather organizations and startups that says, oh, you can, this is how. We work with Ofcom closely to make sure Online Safety Bill Act is correctly in place, and we don't divert from what is the most important, which is protecting the most vulnerable online.
Amazing. Well, the most esteemed panel, so thank you all for joining us this morning. Now, with this topic, I always feel like it feels like we're on the back foot. We're sort of desperately trying to tackle technology's safety problem. But I wanted to get a feel from you guys how realistic it is in terms of how far we have come in terms of making positive changes in this space. Again, just trying to kick off and trying to understand, how far we have come in progressing in this area rather than the doom and gloom of all of the issues. Who wants to go off? Who wants to kick off first? Go on, you're on the end.
I'll have a go.
I'll pick on everyone first and then we'll flow.
So it's been about 10 years or so that I've been doing this work, and I think the good news is the conversations are getting easier. 2015, 2014, when I started chatting about this, no one was talking about ethics, responsibility, safety. Now everyone knows that these are issues that need to be taken seriously. Partly that's regulation has come in that has teeth, and so that obviously incentivizes people to prioritize these issues. But I also see an increased willingness. A lot of the time this has come from sort of rank and file workers within tech companies, not just the leaders. The big problem still is operationalizing that, right? People have good intentions, they recognize here's something that we need to do. The question is how? So the conversations I'm having are less about why do I need to care? Then now, how do I need to do this in actuality? That's certainly progress. So I draw some hope from that. We've still got a huge amount of work to do to give people those tools that becomes second nature, that becomes habit. But yeah, I think we have certainly progressed. Political headwinds are probably against us, right now, but maybe that's something we can get later, or get into later. But nevertheless, that appetite, that willingness, I think, is there.
Where do you think the sort of sea change has been in terms of the willingness to change?
I would place its origins again in worker mobilization. So things like the Google walkout, the reaction to Project Maven, which was this DoD contract that Microsoft had that essentially saw wildcat strikes and walkouts and protests from workers. Now, workers have, I think, now suffered some repercussions for that. I think some execs have basically said, well, let them meet precarity as a result, and started to punish workers for this. And I think that's one of the big reasons we've seen this tech downturn. But for me, that was sort of a sea change moment, which was 2016, 17, really, that it started to be on every worker's agenda.
Yeah, and are companies already sort of making progress? Like, is it true that we're playing catch up, or are individual companies? Because that's talking about like wider industry change, but I'm thinking from inside an organization, are people progressing? Anna?
I think so. I come from a more third-party online safety as a company element in, right? Nowadays, you see moderation companies, you see moderators falling sick. You have to have systems in place that considers that human elements, not only for the customers or users, but also for the ones that work within the company, so they don't get PTSDs and issues and problems from dealing with the negative impacts of online safety. Those conversations are happening, the need is coming, so this is where tech can be a bad guy, tech can be the savior. Yeah. Too strong of a word, but you get the point. But also, how far we have come. I remember many years ago, we had to have a conversation because they said, oh, are you a cybersecurity company? And I'm like, no. And I'm a cyber god, no offense to cybersecurity people, I'm one of you guys. But Securium is an online safety, which our job is to protect humans from harms, not machines from attacks. There is a little bit of a difference there, right? But we couldn't have a conversation around it. Within the UK, we launched online safety tech as an industry in 2019. It didn't exist, it didn't have a name. So see how far we have come to having those conversations. Now we can consider the safety, the ethical elements, and what is the result of our solutions or our company solutions within the people inside or out.
Amazing. I'm just going to shoot the first question to you again, Livia. Like, how far do you feel like we've come in tackling some of these issues?
I think we're one of the most important intersections right now because we have ever-expanding intelligence. We need to fuel it with computational power. But as well as what you said, we have two big fields, like how are humans interacting safely with technology, where we still look into our digital identities like social media, and they're just at the first idea of what it will probably become in the future. But then also we look into how do agents securely interact with agents. If we look into the BFCI sector, and we think about we want to replace this with agentic behavior, there we need to have secure systems because we will not be able to review that output. So these two fields, we have come so far that we have developed the technology to tackle that on scale, but now we need to redefine how we as humans can trust that technology.
How would you propose doing that? No small questions.
For me, I think first of all is to have the awareness that the way we interact with technology needs to be reviewed. That has been on an automatic train for the last 10 years, like Amazon Alexa. It's an IoT device. It's amazing, everybody bought it, but nobody really thought about what it's doing in my household. Same for vacuum cleaners. So if you talk about this kind of consumer part, there we are pretty coming into consciousness. If we move forward now, we need to find a way to trust it again, and that is a personal question. And I think a lot of people haven't really looked into themselves and asked themselves, what is technology for me? And when do I feel safe with technology and when not? It was the ever promise of being more efficient and being more connected. And yeah, it turns out to not be fully true. So step one, check yourself on when you feel safe, how much technology do you want to have in your life? And then step 2, the parts you don't feel safe, at least inform and have an opinion. A lot of times when I'm teaching in universities, people actually tell me, oh, I don't know anything about AI, I don't have an opinion. Yeah, that's funny, you shop on Amazon, you know AI pretty well. Please have an opinion, because otherwise we're isolated in a discussion. So we can have the best technology, but we need everybody as a societal consensus to have one to start.
Yeah, I was just, no, you go. Interrupt, please.
I was agreeing with her.
What did you say, sorry?
I was agreeing with her.
Oh, okay.
Well, if I may, then I'll chip in. I think that's really astute, because we've got this far with a fairly limited model of how humans interact with technology. It's always been, frankly, a myth that technology is a tool. I mean, it is, but it's not just a tool. It's plenty more than that as well. But the age we're entering into now, it becomes increasingly difficult to see technology as just a tool. And AI is not just something you're going to use for your own purposes and then put down. The word agent is morally very significant, right? In ethics, like, we reserve that for very high grade types of ethical responsibility. But as we approach something like that, the public has to form new mental models of what technology is and how you interact with it. It's not just a tool. It's certainly not a person. It doesn't have consciousness, but it's going to be somewhere in this new weird hybrid space, and we don't have the vocabulary or the mental models for that yet. It's a big piece of work ahead.
I fully agree that the mental model needs to change. Especially agent gives this connotation of it's serving us, which is interesting, because I think the general broad thing is that people are like, oh, I use ChatGPT and that's so cool. Yeah, they can replicate. Like when, for example, can self-replicate on 11 GPUs compared to you need 23,000 to have one model. So it's fairly small amount. We have crossed the line of emergent behavior. So when AI is getting into the space of consciousness, not in full, but in the space of that, we will actually be faced with something which is for us undetectable if it's true or false in a scale. So I think this mental model reframing starts now, when every individual redefines, if it's an agent for you, treat it like an agent. If it's a knowledge base for you, treat it like an encyclopedia. That will allow us as a society to find ways to shape it in our interest.
Yeah, and on that AI, I was listening to a podcast you're on, Kenneth, actually, I'm just going to pick on you now, where you were talking about how AI relies on people not understanding what is happening. And like, can you elaborate just on that a little bit more and sort of explain how then we could tap more into its understanding to protect ourselves?
So I can't remember the specific context that I was on about, but this is probably something to do with things like hallucinations, because I talk about hallucinations a lot. I really dislike that as a label. A hallucination makes it seem like a sort of, absent-minded emeritus professor just gets a bit confused. No, this is a quasi or semi-intentional design choice by the makers of these systems, that they've chosen to prioritize certain values over other values. And particularly, they've chosen to prioritize plausibility over accuracy. That sleight of hand is only possible because these systems are essentially presented like magic interfaces, that you have no business understanding what goes on beneath the hood of these systems. Now, they're mathematically opaque anyway, so it's pretty hard to explain unless you're deep into sort of, machine learning and advanced stats and so on. But there has been this decision almost to occlude the workings of these systems that has allowed companies to say, and by magic, it will tell you all this sort of stuff. And that's potentially not very good. So there's, looking for the optimistic spin, there's an opportunity to work on how we make these systems more interrogable, explainable. I don't love transparent as a word, but understandable to humans, because right now, that the fact that those workings are hidden, that doesn't actually help the industry, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, thinking as sort of the creators of all this, when we think about ethics in tech, it can sometimes feel sort of abstract, or definitely like a later stage concern, I feel like, especially in early stage startups. So how can founders sort of integrate safety and accountability for from day one without sort of interrupting their flow of innovation? Who wants to go on that one? Anna, you're next to me.
I don't believe in fear being a good motivator, but consider if something happens, how much reputation and revenue and customers you would lose. Even from that perspective. So I don't believe in that because I believe ethics and you know, online safety, both for those inside and out, should come first. But even if not for that, even if you put your business hat on and look at the numbers are going to pay if you consider those things. So even for small startups, it's easier to build the foundation right than to knock everything down and rebuild it. Consideration for these things might be a day of brainstorming at the early stage.
A day, yeah?
You know, it's an 8 hours, the team gets together, we are a new startup, we're considering consultations with relevant people. It might be something that you do 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours. It can something be implemented, or at least a consideration can be made
no excuses.
for it. It depends. I mean, yes, probably. I don't know. I was just generalizing. Apologies for those who's going to take longer. You know, but otherwise, if you're, you know, you're going to put a car out there without a seatbelt and go, good luck. And at what point people are going to come back and say, guess what? And I think early considerations for small things would make a very big difference in the long run.
Do you have any concrete examples? Anyone down the line? Never?
I think it's like a synergy. If you do a startup, you're in a high pressure environment. Like every day something pops up, you have a roadmap, you need to ship with velocity. So obviously thinking about security, unfortunately, if you don't do a security startup, I wish that the whole industry, so if there are any VCs in the room, pressure your founders on the topic a bit. Like don't sit just down for them and be like, oh, what are the numbers? Don't ask just what is the IP, but also how do you secure your infrastructure? If we talk in Copenhagen and people are like, what's the number one thing, Livia? I'm like, get an isolated laptop, please. Like this is the minimum you can do. Don't use your 12-year-old ThinkPad where you have actually no idea what data is on there. And I wish that there would be more general standards in the industry. If you raise money, that people are like, okay, one part of this money is please for blank new devices, for basic security, because we're also running into an age of AI scams. And for sure and certain, that will be a lot of startups because their data is valuable. So in that high-pressure environment, I also would wish that we could take the time, and I do think, especially after a year later, they need to sit down. But for everything else, I wish we should start at day one with new devices, secured, locked in, make it mandatory to have like a password, external manager. Like this basic stuff, we still taught people at Accenture should be standard by now.
And is it better, sorry, also then back to your point in terms of making it like a commercial argument rather than an ethical humanity argument?
I think both should be there, because for the world outside or the investor world, that is also the numbers would talk as well. But the thing is, these days, you know, just going back to the example of the cars, is the same example with the houses. You would not have it without a lock, without the windows, without just an open space. Here we go. Good luck. Yeah. So neither the builders are going to build that, nor those who are going to live are going to accept that. But that's actually what we're doing at the moment, right? And cameras, locks, and all of these are the securities that we need to take with us, the considerations of that into the cyberspace or online.
Yeah. Can I jump in on that?
Yeah, jump in.
The question about financial arguments for ethics comes up a lot. I always like to yes and it. You absolutely need to make a business case for this type of stuff. But if you just rely on a dollar value, the problem is what you're doing is you're unwittingly arguing that ethics should always be subservient to the profit imperative. And it leaves you without a leg to stand on the minute someone comes along with a deeply unethical solution that earns megabucks. So yes, you make those business case arguments, mostly predicated upon risk. As Anna is mentioning, reputational risk, particularly legal risk, brand reputation, but also talent risk, like you'll lose your best people if you start doing shady stuff. But it's also important to make sort of personal arguments. And for me, a lot of ethics is really about values. What do we choose to prioritize? What do we think is more valuable than something else? And we know that particularly within startups, the decisions you make about values are amplified. Like your first, your second, your third, your fourth hires are probably the most important your company will ever make because they set the value template for the company. And one thing we've seen repeatedly is that hustle culture in startups becomes an ethical liability in a scale-up. We've seen it with Uber, we've seen it with Brewdog, these types of companies that are, punchy and edgy and, kind of do anything to get ahead. That becomes a toxic brand. Very, very easily because they've chosen to prioritize a certain value over another value. And that gets imprinted upon the culture of the organization so early that it becomes very hard to shake. So that's why it's important to have these discussions about values really early on. What do we actually believe in? What do we stand for as a company? You get that imprint right, and that will scale with you and hopefully alleviate a lot of those potential problems as you grow.
I don't know if you guys can speak to this, but are you seeing talent come a lot more into a role with this all in mind? Like they're seeking out those companies that they know are ethically aligned, or is it sort of like still people saying that's what they want, but they also then just jump to what company's offering them what?
As an online safety tech company, I think 90% of our hires have been because of our mission and vision. People have joined because they believe in us and they wanted to be part of the journey. So for me, it has been 100%, well, 90%, 95% yes.
Yeah, I need to smile a bit because yes, they come for the values, but you're also right. These values can easily turn into the next version of hustle culture. So that's something I also need to maintain a lot. And it's not that easy. Like, I think if you look into that, like we're building around trust. We're building trust infrastructure. Everything is around trust. So obviously I trust my people. And sometimes it wonders because they're like, oh, it's super ventures in Berlin. What are the others doing? I don't know. I trust them. They're my co-founders. So they will do something that is good for the business. And I'm excited after this week to talk to them. But on the other hand, I need to report numbers. I need to report velocity. And best, I do this in weekly sprints. I need to develop. I need to check on GitHub. There are tons of metrics. So escaping that and translating that just into value, value then also needs to get measured. And I think that is something where we walk away from the general hustle culture, at least in Europe, but also I see way more voices being like, oh, if we want to outpace any American ecosystem, then we will actually need to drop our European values. So it's kind of a culture clash going on right now.
That's very interesting. You also nodded.
Yeah, I don't play with those rules yet.
Badass. Like, we like it. We like it.
There's still some life-work balance there. I hope so.
I just wanted to bring VCs into all of this and kind of understand the responsibility that they have. We talked about it from the founder side, and just what responsibility do they have in ensuring that the companies that they back are building ethically? And do you feel like they're in that debate, or are they one step removed?
We had this in the pre-interview. So everything, what is numbers, and especially creating memos, going into the IC, then deciding the whole process is pretty number and industry information driven. That can be replaced by AI, and that will be in the future. The deal analysis, so what's left is deal flow. And that deal flow, once you have the numbers, solely goes on the human relationship. So especially venture capital in the next 5 years will transform from the main numbers game to who holds the best connections to the best founders. And that is something where also if you have portfolio companies, they need to transform now. The relation to the human will drive it, and they will inherently drive the value because everything else will be better analyzed by AI, to put it really, really simply. And I'm looking forward to that, to be fair. I'm really looking forward to it. Not on a sake, but just on a note. If you're doing deep tech, the majority of the VCs don't understand what you do. So for me, it's an endless repeat and repeat and repeat and trying to break it down to just, at the end, sit there and be like, can we focus that we want to walk for 5 to 7 years through hell together? Can I know that you back me up when shit's hitting the fan, please? So, I think it would split. Funds that are totally made for B2B stars and just simply splash and splurge. They will erase out because the numbers will tell you which deal probably is the best, but cap tables that are worth something will solely rely on the personal connection.
I hope so too. It's very optimistic view, like it. You share it as well.
I share the pain, but that's what brings the importance to the impact investor. Hi, Dama. She's from Bethnal Green Ventures. She's going to come next if you don't know. They are one of the great investors. They have backed us up and they're part of our current round. So it's that understanding and looking from the social and environmental and ethical impact businesses that their job is to push these things forward with all the difficulties. My God, deep tech. I also occasionally get that I don't look techy enough, although my PhD was in computer science, so that also becomes... So I would love if there is a non-biased AI which is going to judge situations when it comes to non-impact VC's element where people are actually going to learn. I often get why LLMs cannot analyze chat conversations, but I think there is a huge value in the general VC that, particularly when you're deep tech, which some of the online safety companies are, it takes time in order to deliver. And just as I spoke, you can't go and minimum viable product and label somebody as something and go oopsie daisy. Right, minimum viable product, I didn't know this is going to happen. So you need to do a lot of research, background work, testing, and trials before you can actually deliver. And therefore, the support that allows you to do that in a safe and ethical way, both for the users and the consumer side, or who's going to impact, it's very important. And that gap, yes, there are funds and grants that are going to help you to innovate at the start, but it's that VC support that is going to take you over the line in order for you to be able to deliver.
Yeah. I mean, just a quick note, I think the main advantage, I suppose, that VCs have in this conversation is they're one of the only authorities a startup will listen to. Because startups, don't even view themselves as real businesses yet, a lot of them, right? We're an experiment in search of a sustainable business. And so there's an incentive to discard the advice of experts and execs and leaders and case studies and say, oh, we're doing things differently, we're finding our own route. But then when you reach that funding gate, then you have that authority as an investor to say, I need you to do this, I need you to take this seriously. So that for me is, I think, the really important role that investors can have, yeah.
I think also that's really, really important. That's why I'm happy if that shapes way more to personal relation. Like, we have one angel who develops the term angel, but I've met numerous where it's more an industry name. And yes, I listen to that person. Literally, for like every minor thing. I never get the feeling of too much. And the same for, if you do deep tech and MVP in security, probably won't work. Like, what should I tell you? Oh, it's an MVP. I'm sorry, the security standard wasn't reached. That's not possible. And this long way with VCs, in my perspective, deliver on a value and should focus on is to get people like me who are 90% in front of the screen, like just developing, just doing product, to do commercial and go into the world and get connections and everything, because that takes also time to consult, to go in the role of setting the pace, setting rules, and be open and be a safe space for that. Because if you want a startup to valuably grow, and we need to fetch, contracts where we don't have the support to evaluate if that's right or wrong, that can easily go wrong. Still makes money, but probably won't scale in the long term.
As two founders, is there a tangible piece of advice you would ask from your VCs? Is there anything that's I need this, guys?
If anybody is doing deep tech here and you talk about IP in AI, does anybody have a portfolio company who just recently registered any IP around AI cybersecurity? I would love to get advice on this because it's a pretty new area where we talk about new scoring systems and new areas mixing in. So the IP process, which we need to set up in the early stage, is something I would love to talk about.
From the founder perspective, any sort of real takeaways that a VC could have from your perspective, what you need for help on this?
Your suggestion was amazing. You know, putting something structure in place, I think that was brilliant. I think from our perspective, it's because something is for good doesn't mean there is no money in it. And having that open mind to see the numbers, right? If somebody is providing to big techs, you know, big AI companies, big social platforms and gaming, there is no reason they shouldn't be charged. So there is a lot of money, a good can be done while the numbers are gonna support it. And removing that preconception of anything with impact or anything for good is not gonna be scalable, is not gonna be sustainable. When I joined few accelerators in the past, they told, oh, you know, this is not a business model that works. And I'm like, yeah, I'm still here a few years down the line. And I think it's that human element and the impact that is gonna make the difference between companies that are gonna be sustainable and gonna last long versus the ones that they just wanna fill their pocket and disappear.
I think that's the big message as well from the Control-Alt+Better community, is that like impact doesn't mean we're not going to make any money. Like that is the overall sort of mission. So thank you for sharing that, doing our job.
If you consider all that, hospitals don't have to exist.
Exactly.
Right? If making somebody feel better or if that cannot be a business model of making people feel safe, good, and kind of detect or prevent harms, it can be physical, financial, or mental, none of these businesses would be around.
Well, I thought it'd be good to actually just have a little deep dive into some examples from each of your individual cases in terms of where you've seen a challenge around technology and safety, but where it's actually driven an innovation or a better sort of business outcome, where you were like, this is a real blocker, but in the blocker, we sort of have a better outcome. And some concrete examples I like to hear.
I'm not sure I'm the best person because our whole business is around online safety. So we deal with it like all blockers, our daily ups and downs, the roller coasters.
Have you seen any from other companies, though, where you were pitched that and you found a better outcome?
I think we've seen people who, this is about social media organization that originally, I'm trying to bite my tongue and not give any names, and I'm not good at that. So they originally put a platform out without moderation. They had to then, a few years down the line, rebrand entirely with the full moderation team, because they realize they're losing customers, they're losing reputation, and they're putting people in danger. So that consideration didn't come only with, okay, let's go and hire a team, but it came with a complete rebranding and everything that then changed. Now they are one of the best moderated companies, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's how you learn to change. Unfortunately, it was few bad incidents was the motivator. But at the end, those were the blockers for them to grow as well and reach to bigger markets. Now they're one of the best protected ones, I think.
Amazing, yeah, great example. Go down the line, Kenneth.
I think case studies are one of the big one of the big weak points of the responsible tech movement. Partly that's because there's not much glamour in it, right? There's no mechanic who becomes famous for tightening the bolt that prevents a plane crash. You know, that's just the job. And so sometimes companies don't talk enough about the risk mitigation process and work that they do and the harms that may avert later down the line. When I worked at Twitter, very different company back then to whatever it is today, but quite a few times I'd be in a meeting where there was a new feature being discussed, and you know, most of the design crit group was ready to say, yeah, it's great, let's prototype it, let's ship it. And there'd very commonly be someone unlike me, you know, or unlike the 5 other white guys in the meeting, and then someone who wasn't a white guy would say, have you realized that people from my community could be, you know, harmed by this feature in this way, or we would never use it this way, or, you know, good luck getting this past these folks. So I've got plenty of examples of poorly thought through ideas being correctly rebuffed by people with a broader perspective. The problem is it's very hard then to say the product is better in this way because of that intervention. So it is tricky sometimes. But I think, we can look at some of the guardrails that LLMs have, I think generally have been very successful. Imagine how easily we could have seen far more headlines about Gemini teaching a kid how to make napalm, or whatever these harm cases might be, that they, I think, have done a pretty good job of putting some fairly robust guardrails. Now, obviously, you can hack around them if you know how to red team it and how to kind of dupe it into saying naughty things, but generally, I think that's a good example of safety being built in from the ground up. Tons more work, again, still to be done. But yeah, like I say, it's not a glamorous thing to avert harm before it happens. This is why we tend not to talk about these case studies so much.
Yeah, it's really not glamorous. I fully agree. We try to make it glamorous here. Every blocker we have right now is going to be, when it's solved, a legacy tech in 10 years. That we need to be aware, because we are building right now around LLMs. So if you're not constructing and be an infrastructure engineer at one of the providers, every startup I look into, we have tons of blockers. Like, we literally need to invent or merge system and merge new frameworks. The old way is not working, meaning we need to figure out what will work in the future. We're here for optimism, so I think it's amazing. It's a lot of fun to dig into new paradigms and framework. It's a lot of fun to measure systems. Unfortunately, it's not glamorous. They're not that safe for red teaming. I think you don't need a red team, unfortunately, to break it. That's one of the things I'm most worried about. But if I take one, measure the output. So we can only build our system to measure the moment the token leaves the model. And we want to do a real-time tracing of that. So that is something, if you want to do that on scale, it requires you completely new paradigms, because the use of the tokens is in millions to billions. So that is something I'm sitting in front right now, which is a blockage. How do I ensure scalability of our system? And that requires some more new computational infrastructure. For example, we store tamper-proof on Solana, which is something I thought, okay, I don't need to use, but it's amazing to do. We need to use a mathematical miracle tree to figure out that our system doesn't get frauded, for example. So every blockage right now is going to be also an opportunity to create a new world of tech.
I love that. Great. And you can end the session there with that nice little line. That's all we've got time for, but thank you for my lovely panelists. And we'll cut there. Thank you guys so much.